In part one of this video, I mentioned that chapter 53 is really a short discourse on humility. And think about that for a minute. Think about the vows that the monks take in the monasteries. Think about the solemn promises that we oblates make in associating with a monastery. The vows or solemn promises of obedience, stability, conversion of life. Now, in talking about humility, we can be obedient without exercising humility. We can stay in one place, professing some type of stability without exercising humility. But conversion of life, there is no conversion of life without humility. We cannot grow spiritually without humility. I'm reminded of something that the prophet Micah wrote in Micah 6:8. And 6:8 follows a couple of verses where he's presenting this scenario to God. What can I offer to the Lord? What can I give to God? Can I give him my works? Can I give him this? Can I give him that? Can I preach a good sermon? Can I exercise spiritual gifts? Can I do this, that, or the other and secure a right standing with him? And ultimately the prophet concluded, no. He said, he has told you, O mortal. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Humility. I can't bring myself to be a humble person. I can't bring myself to exercise humility. Well, that just doesn't seem right, to lower myself to some type of subservient position to anybody, let alone to a God that I can't see. Well, let me read you something by one of my favorite writers, one of my favorite 20th century writers. He was a monk, and he's dead and gone now. Shirley and I had the privilege to visit his home and to kneel by his graveside, and that was a very meaningful thing for us to be able to visit the Abbey of Gethsemane and to visit the grave of Father Louis, Thomas Merton. And something that Merton wrote in one of the books, and if you've never read Merton, if you're unfamiliar with his writings, he wrote a lot. And one of the first introductions to his writings that I had was this little book, New Seeds of Contemplation. It's a great read. It's full of humbling advice, so to speak. Pick it up, read it. And Merton talks in a chapter in here on humility against despair. He writes, it is almost impossible to overestimate the value of true humility and its power in the spiritual life. For the beginning of humility is the beginning of blessedness, and the consummation of humility is the perfection of all joy. Humility contains in itself the answer to all the great problems of the life of the soul. It is the only key to faith with which the spiritual life begins. For faith and humility are inseparable. In perfect humility, all selfishness disappears, and your soul no longer lives for itself or in itself for God, and it is lost and submerged in Him and transformed into Him. We stop working and begin being. And he says a couple paragraphs later, talking about our struggle against humbling ourselves, our struggle against humility, our tendency to be prideful. And he says, if we were incapable of humility, we would be incapable of joy, because humility alone can destroy the self-centeredness that makes joy impossible. Mentioned yesterday in that video about how we are such a self-centered, egotistical generation, and perhaps that egotistical self-centeredness is one of the reasons why so many people are having such despair at the crisis that we're experiencing regarding this COVID-19 virus. What we see as joy really isn't joy. The things that we seek after are leaving our souls, are leaving our lives empty and hollow. How do we view people? How do we treat people? In this 53rd chapter of the Rule of Saint Benedict, talking about the reception of guests at the monastery, chapter 53, verses 6 and 7 say, all humility should be shown in addressing a guest on arrival or departure by a bow of the head or by a complete prostration of the body. Christ is to be adored because He is indeed welcomed in them. That's a pretty tough thing there. We're to greet them with a bow of the head, or even to prostrate ourselves before the guests that arrive at a monastery, at their arrival and at their departure, showing respect for Christ in them, treating them as though we would treat Jesus Christ if He were standing before us. I think that is such a challenging thing. It is such an illuminating thing that Benedict calls us to view everyone we encounter as though we were encountering Jesus Christ Himself in that person. And I'll ask the questions again. How do we view people? How do we treat people? You know, pridefulness will always insist that we're better than others. Humility is the antithesis of pride. And humility will never allow us to see ourselves, or not to see ourselves. Humility will never allow us to see others as inferior to the superior selves that we think we are. And that's what Benedict in the Rule is after. He's after humility. He's seeking humility. He realizes that humility is the key to overcoming every obstacle in our life that Satan can place there. And every obstacle in our life, every sin in our life is related to that first sin of pride in our garden parents. And that's why, regardless of our obedience, we can in a sense be obedient to the rule without ever growing in humility. We can grit our teeth, we can stay in one place and grit our teeth, we can get through life, we can endure the rule as inmates in a prison. Or we can see the rule, we can see obedience, we can see stability as stepping stones to conversion. And we can yield ourselves to the tutelage that's given to us.